Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wallace, your testimony addresses the possibility of inserting malware into voting machines themselves. Can you elaborate on how malware could be loaded onto machines that are not connected to the internet, and further explain what it means that each and every single voting machine has to be manipulated? Or is there a different way where you could just hack one machine and that would transmit a bug to other machines in the precinct, again, even though they're not connected to an internet?
Sure. So before we had an internet, we had computers with floppy drives, and there were computer viruses that could spread from one computer to another over floppies. Electronic voting machines, some of them use memory cards, some of them have these big battery packs, some of them have local area networks. Studies conducted in 2007 by the state of California, state of Ohio, state of Florida found security vulnerabilities that could take advantage of these to engineer viruses where one compromised voting machine could then infect eventually the entire fleet of machines for an entire county.
Okay, so it's accurate to say that just because something's not connected to the internet, it does not have a vulnerability to cyber attack.
Being disconnected from the internet helps, but it's not a panacea.
Okay. Perhaps as Secretary of State, Mr. Shedler, you could talk about, I spoke with our Secretary of State, Husted, about their protocols, but perhaps you could elaborate on how do your procedures protect against that risk should something like that occur?
Well, I think it's important to remember that, we never link together. I know there's some systems, new systems that are being touted of like a Wi-Fi, and if you had a multiple precinct site where you have a Wi-Fi, now that to me is a little scary. But when you consider the concept of each individual machine has a cartridge that's delivered by my office. Now, we're a top-down system. We're not by county in Louisiana, so we are vastly different. But days before, 2 or 3 days before, we literally deliver all the cartridges for all 10,000 machines to the various parishes, counties, to the clerk of court. The morning of the election, and when we deliver a secure laptop that is our equipment, it's not used to go shop on Amazon or anything else. And the morning of the election, the commissioner in charge for that precinct picks up those cartridges and puts that cartridge individually into the machine, turns the machine on, and at the end of the night, that cartridge is retrieved. It is driven back to the clerk of court with a sheriff's escort usually, and it's inputted into that laptop. And it is on a closed circuit line sent to my office in Baton Rouge. Okay. I mean, it is a little bit different, but to my knowledge, no state interlocks machines. So the concept of getting into one machine with one cartridge and you miraculously change all 10,000 across the state is ridiculous, because you'd have to go into each machine individually, and you'd have to have the programming.
Right. So in your system, you have one card. Ohio's system is similar. You have one card, goes to one machine. Dr. Wallach, you mentioned a case study in Ohio. Perhaps you could elaborate on that, what that real vulnerability is.
Right. So the study in Ohio was called Everest, I believe. The similar study in California was called the Top to Bottom Review. I was part of the Top to Bottom Review. And each of these studies is that regular poll workers and election officials going through their standard procedures and standard operations could unwittingly be used to transmit viruses from one machine to another through the motion. Typically at the end of the election day, you move a memory card through each of the machines in the precinct, and that's to collect the vote totals. That process can spread a virus. And there are other processes. The details vary from machine to machine.
Would a centralized, federally controlled national voting infrastructure increase or decrease that risk?
That depends how it was built. I've been working with Travis County on trying to design something new where this wouldn't be a problem. The system that Los Angeles County is working on, this wouldn't be a problem. And the reason why is because they generate paper backups, or rather paper ballots, which could then be audited against any electronic results.
This is Ohio's. The machine itself has memory, the card has memory, and it prints a roll tape that stays secure inside the machine. And you can audit any one of those. So it's a good system in Ohio. It's been tested a lot. in Ohio will likely be front and center again in this election. Dr. Romine, sorry. You stated in your written testimony that the NIST voting programs partnered with the AC to develop the science, tools, and standards necessary to improve accuracy, reliability, and usability and security of voting equipment used in federal elections for both domestic and overseas voters. How do you measure these improvements? How do you quantify them? Are there qualitative, quantitative measures?
There are both. I don't have the details today that on exactly the measurement of those improvements. I'd be happy to provide those to you. I think the issue, to a large extent, has been listening to the accessibility community, the human factors research to do demonstrates certain kinds of changes that can be made to improve the accessibility and the usability of electronic voting systems, and we've documented those in various reports. I can give you pointers to those reports for the way in which those systems have been improved.
Okay, aside from identity theft, my apologies, my time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson.